Chicago, 1911. The city was loud, crowded, alive with industry and ambition. Streetcars rattled down iron tracks. Factory whistles cut through the air. Immigrant families crowded into brick two-flats, chasing the fragile promise of the American dream. And on a quiet spring morning, a 4-year-old girl in a red dress stepped outside her home and disappeared. Her name was Eliška Elsie Paroubek. What followed would become one of the most extensive missing child investigations in early American history. A case that gripped the nation, fueled prejudice, shattered a family, and remains unsolved more than a century later. This is the story of Elsie Paroubek, the victim's life. Elsie was born in 1906 in Chicago to Czech immigrant parents, František Paroubek and Karolina Vojáčková. Her parents had emigrated from Bohemia in 1895, part of a wave of Central European families seeking work and stability in America. They settled on Chicago's southwest side, in a neighborhood filled with fellow Czech immigrants who shared language, customs, and community ties. Frank worked as a painter and laborer. The work was inconsistent, the pay modest. Karolina managed the household and raised their children. Life was not luxurious, but it was structured around family, resilience, and shared struggle. The Paroubeks were freethinkers, no longer affiliated with the Catholic Church. Because of this, Elsie's birth was never officially registered with the city. There is no formal birth certificate. Even her exact birth date remains uncertain. In a way, from the very beginning, Elsie existed in partial obscurity. But to her family, she was vivid and alive. Neighbors remembered her as small and delicate, with light blonde hair and pale skin. She had bright eyes and a quiet demeanor. She often wore a red cotton dress with black stockings and lace-up shoes, clothing typical for a working-class child in 1911 Chicago. Her world was small. A few city blocks, familiar faces, the corner grocery, her aunt's house just around the bend, safe. Or so everyone believed. The morning she vanished, April 8th, 1911. It was a Saturday morning. The air was cool but clear. Around mid-morning, Elsie told her mother she was going to visit her aunt, Julia Trampota, who lived only a short walk away at 2325 South Troy Street. It was not an unusual trip. She had made it before. Karolina allowed her to go. During that short walk, Elsie encountered her 9-year-old cousin Josie and several neighborhood children gathered around an organ grinder performing in the street. The mechanical instrument echoed cheerfully, its music drifting between brick buildings. Children laughed. A small monkey may have accompanied the grinder, accounts vary. But the spectacle was common entertainment in immigrant neighborhoods. The children followed the organ grinder as he began moving down the block. Elsie did not. She remained behind. That was the last confirmed sighting of her alive. Hours later, when Karolina stopped by her sister's house, she expected to find Elsie playing there. Instead, she learned that Elsie had never arrived. At first, there was confusion, not panic. Children wandered. They lost track of time. Maybe she had stopped at another friend's home. Maybe she was hiding, playing a game. But as afternoon turned to evening, unease hardened into fear. When Frank returned home from work and learned his daughter was missing, the family searched the neighborhood frantically. They checked basements, alleys, yards, vacant lots. Nothing. At 9 p.m., Frank reported his daughter missing to the local police station. By nightfall, a nightmare had begun. A city mobilized. What happened next was unprecedented for its time. Elsie's disappearance spread rapidly through Chicago newspapers. Headlines described a missing blonde child. Public sympathy was immediate and intense. The case escalated beyond a routine missing persons report. Within days, hundreds of volunteers were searching. 20 police officers were assigned. Community leaders stepped in. The Czech community rallied fiercely around the Paroubeks, offering a $500 reward, a significant sum in 1911. Political figures also became involved. Illinois Governor Charles S. Deneen issued a public statement urging citizens to assist in the search. Chicago's superintendent of schools requested that school children use their spring break to search alleys and vacant lots in their neighborhoods. The disappearance of one 4-year-old girl had become a citywide crisis. But as the search intensified, so did speculation. The Romani theory early rumors centered on a so-called gypsy wagon, reportedly seen a block from where Elsie vanished. The suspicion ignited quickly. Just 4 years earlier, a child named Lillian Wolfe had been kidnapped and later found living among traveling Romani groups. That memory lingered in the public imagination. It provided a ready-made explanation, one rooted more in fear and prejudice than evidence. Police raided Romani encampments along the Des Plaines River. Wagons were searched. Families were interrogated. Children were examined closely. Reports poured in from surrounding towns, Volo, McHenry, rural Wisconsin, claiming a blonde girl had been seen traveling with Romani groups. Each report triggered hope. Each time, it collapsed. The children found were not Elsie. Despite extensive searches across multiple states, no evidence tied any Romani individuals to her disappearance. But the damage, fueled by xenophobia, had already been done. The organ grinder and the Black Hand attention then shifted to the organ grinder, the last adult figure associated with Elsie before she vanished. Detectives searched Chicago's Italian Quarter near West 14th and South Halsted Streets. Rumors circulated about the Black Hand, a shadowy criminal organization accused of extortion and kidnapping within immigrant communities. The theory suggested Elsie might have been abducted for ransom, but no ransom note ever came. No demands were made. Still, suspicion lingered around the unknown organ grinder. His identity was never conclusively established. He was questioned, investigated, but never charged. Another lead dissolved into nothing. A father's desperation. As days stretched into weeks, Frank Paroubek's desperation deepened. He traveled across Illinois following rumors. He went as far as Cherry Valley and into Wisconsin chasing tips. He consulted a psychic, hoping for guidance. He followed any whisper of a blonde child seen in distress. Meanwhile, anonymous letters began arriving, written in English, a language Frank could not read fluently. The letters accused the family of mistreating Elsie. They were cruel, taunting. Police attempted to identify the writer, believing the letters might contain hidden clues. The author was never found. The search continued for 31 days. Then, on May 9, 1911, everything changed. The discovery near the Lockport power plant. An engineer spotted something floating in the waters of the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal. It was the body of a small child. When Elsie's parents arrived at the funeral home where the body was taken, Carolina identified her daughter by her clothing. The red dress, black stockings, lace shoes. She reportedly cried, "It's you, my darling. Thank God we found you and you're not in the hands of the gypsies." Relief and devastation intertwined in a single moment. The autopsy created confusion. Some officials initially believed Elsie had drowned, but physicians E.A. Kingston and W.R. Paddock found no water in her lungs, suggesting she had been killed before entering the canal. There were marks on her throat, deep cuts on her face. Another examination suggested she may have been suffocated, possibly by a hand over her mouth. Strangled, suffocated, assaulted. The reports conflicted publicly. In the end, despite strong suspicion of murder, the official cause of death was recorded as unknown. Even in death, certainty was denied. The funeral, Elsie's funeral, on May 12, 1911, drew between 2,000 and 5,000 mourners. Her white coffin was surrounded by floral arrangements sent by city officials and community leaders. Because her family were freethinkers, the service was secular, led by a Czech-language newspaper editor rather than a priest. She was buried at Bohemian National Cemetery among her community. But the case was not closed. Suspects and collapse. A hermit peddler named Joseph Canesti became a primary suspect. He lived in a shack near the canal. Detectives found a green hair ribbon and a hemp sack inside. The discovery seemed incriminating. On May 10th, Konesti threw himself in front of a train. To many, it looked like guilt, but 5 days later, authorities officially cleared him, stating there was no direct evidence linking him to Elsie's death. The family's final years, the tragedy consumed the Paroubek family. Frank Paroubek died in 1913, just 2 years after Elsie's funeral, at the age of 45. Some believed grief contributed to his decline. Karolina lived until 1927. Both were buried beside Elsie in Chicago. They never saw justice. The mystery that remains, more than a century later, the murder of Eliška Elsie Paroubek, remains unsolved. Was she taken by a stranger in broad daylight? Was someone in the neighborhood responsible? Did early prejudice misdirect investigators? Did crucial evidence disappear in confusion and media frenzy? We cannot know. What we do know is this: a 4-year-old girl walked around the corner on a spring morning. A city panicked. A family shattered. An investigation unraveled under rumor and bias. And somewhere, in the shadows of 1911 Chicago, a killer was never held accountable. Elsie's red dress, black stockings, and lace shoes became symbols of innocence lost. Her grave still rests quietly in Chicago soil. Her story still echoes through history, and her mystery remains.